Our first guest is a longtime supporter of STAA, the person after whom we named our award to honor the nation's most outstanding collegiate athlete. And it's because of our respect for him and his work. From CBS Sports, 5-time National Sportscaster of the Year, Jim Nantz. Jim, if you would unmute your mic, the roster has got so big. There you are. Thank you. Again, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Man, 400 people, and I'm looking at this mosaic of so many of you right now, and I'm just I'm blown away and excited to be asked. Thank you, John. I just marvel at what you've built, what you've done, and how much you've inspired and motivated, brought hope to our industry, and just good morning, everybody. I'm really grateful to be asked to be a part of this. And John, why don't you fire away some questions, because I know you're going to have one guest after another. I'm going to try to keep my answers as if it's a lightning round on SportsCenter. So
that's perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, the first thing I'm going to start with is asking each guest for just a 30-second summary of how you got to CBS, how you got to where you are now.
Well, first off, everybody should take note that there are there are no two stories that are alike. I went to the University of Houston, and I masqueraded as a golfer. I was a letterman on the golf team one year, but I was really there to try to pursue a broadcasting career. That was what was in my heart. So I studied communications, and I had the good fortune of a lot of breaks falling my way when I was in school. And of course, I was as ambitious as they come to try to create those opportunities and then make the most of them. So when I was in college, I volunteered at a lot of radio stations around the city. It's a big city, obviously, fourth largest by population, big market. And I ended up volunteering at the CBS radio affiliate in Houston. And I would go over there basically every day after school and do whatever they asked me to do. The most rudimentary thing you can come up with. We've got a mic on.
Yeah, hang on. I'm going to
hear that. And hear me, John?
Yep, go ahead.
So, like one opportunity feeds the next if you do it correctly. And by the time I was a junior in college, I was fortunate enough now to be anchoring occasionally on the CBS TV affiliate and still living in the dormitory and going to school and pursuing my degree. I graduated on time in 4 years, but by the time I graduated, because of all these volunteering experiences where I really didn't get any compensation, I eventually got $25 a show for that TV anchor gig. By the time I graduated, I had a pretty good resume. I didn't have a lot of money, but I had a good resume, and I was able to parlay that into an opportunity to go anchor at the CBS affiliate in Salt Lake City. And what was attractive for me on that one was that they were going to give me the opportunity to call games. I really felt like to get where I wanted to go eventually, which was to a network, preferably CBS, that was always in my heart and in my head. I felt like I needed to have experience, and I was going to get there through calling games. And going to Salt Lake City, I had a chance to do Utah Jazz broadcast. I was 23 years old and got a really good break to be in the NBA at that time. And I also did Brigham Young University basketball and football games. So I was getting some play-by-play experience. 2 years later, I'm trying to pull this story up for you, John. I got a call out of the blue from CBS to come back and audition. It wasn't because of play-by-play. It was because of my anchoring that someone had sent a tape, unbeknownst to me, and it had gone to a talent scout like you, who you're exceptional. And that ended up getting in the right hands, and I got summoned back to New York to audition. I was one of five. This is 1985. I know that sounds like prehistoric days, but it was a long time.
Not at all.
And anyway, in 85, I came back to New York. I was one of five to audition for the anchor of the college football studio show. And fortunately, I won the audition. And that led eventually to all the play-by-play opportunities that my career is based upon today is primarily play-by-play. But I got there through studio, as it turned out. I know that's longer than 30 seconds. I missed the count.
No, that's all right. That's valuable stuff.
That's it.
Let's go to the questions. And again, please, everybody, keep your mics muted until I unmute it or until I asked you to unmute it. That way there won't be any audio interference for our speakers. We'll start with Nick Mantegna. I am unmuting your audio. Nick, if you would, please state either your professional affiliation or where you live, whichever one you want.
Hi, John. Thanks, Jim, for the opportunity here. It's great to have you with us. I'm a play-by-play broadcaster with Villanova University in the Philadelphia area. We on Nova Nation All Access. It's Villanova's online TV network. It's lots of fun. I've been doing that for 17 years or so. I'm a Penn State grad, and I get to call all sorts of wonderful sports like lacrosse, soccer, women's volleyball, women's basketball. I get to do some college football, which is great, so I stay busy. Jim, my question for you is how you prepare personally, whether you type up your charts, whether you write them out by hand, and since I sometimes call 5 games in a week, what's the key for you when you have the quick turnaround and you're jumping on a plane from a Thursday night game to a Saturday or Sunday game, and how do you get your work done? Do you get work done on the plane? Do you have to do it in the middle of the night, and how does it affect your sleeping and traveling and eating schedule, and what's the key to getting all of your work done in a tight window?
Thank you, Nick. First off, I love the Nova Nation, and I've loved being able to call a couple of national championships in recent years. But I like to cobble together my boards all week long, and I do it by hand. I know this is really, again, old school because like Tony Romo on football, he has these boards printed out, and they're beautifully done. But mine are all done by hand. And it's just a creature of habit, and it takes more time and effort. But I will tell you this, to do it that way by hand does create a lasting image in your head. I'm just talking NFL. So NFL and college basketball, I have boards. And I know this is, we're all talking the same language here, basically. And, the layman thinks that you just walk into a stadium or an arena and you just watch a basketball game and start talking, not realizing what's gone on leading up to it. The process I love. I have it right here. I'm going to get my last board. Hold on. Hopefully it's
very cool. Remember, everybody keep your mics muted, please.
I'm going to just show you. So here we go. This was my this was my last football game. So this was, and everybody's got them differently than this, but this was the AFC Championship. We didn't have a Super Bowl year, but this is my Kansas City offense against the Tennessee defense. If you remember, the Titans beat Baltimore, upset the 1 seed, and made a nice run. And it ended up, Kansas City and Mahomes came from 10 down to win it, and then came from 10 down to win the Super Bowl. But, I have my tight ends, my wide receivers, my offensive line, the backups. There's Patrick, running backs, etc. And all I have to do is flip it around. And I've got Ryan Tannehill and the Tennessee offense and the Kansas City defense. Everything's color-coded. So when I need to reference it, I can look at it really quickly and know what I'm looking for. I'm not a big height and weight guy. I hear that sometimes in commentary, and I think it's a waste of time. It's filler. It's not needed. Like tackle made, I could just see a guy saying, Derek Nottie on the tackle, 6'1", 305 pounds. We expect all those guys to be 6'1", 305 pounds. So to me, that's not making the most of that space that you have in a 3-hour broadcast. But I do have, in the NFL sense, how many years in the league, what school they went to, and how they got to that team. And I have every board I've ever done. So I made these up years ago. I have them scored. I have them on really, I forget what you call it, but the paper here is like high cardboard quality. And I have them scored so I can fold them and put them on my briefcase. But I work on a little bit of a leapfrog. I'll call a game on Sunday, and by Sunday night, I already have the framework made up with the depth chart from that weekend's game. So it might need to be tweaked a little bit, but I go ahead and get started. And I love to read. So I'm on the internet, and we have a great research team at CBS that supports us. And so we'll get probably 300 clips a day nationally from CBS, but I'll go into the home markets. Let's take this game. And I'll go to the Kansas City Star Tribune, and I'll click on everything that's being written that day that has anything to do with the Chiefs, even if it's just community-related appearances. And I'll do the same thing for the Tennessean, the state newspaper that covers the Titans. And it's a constant process of reading. And I love that process. And by the time, again, because I'm writing out by hand, by the time the game comes around, I really don't even need the board except for the support from my spotter to tell me who is in on the tackle or maybe a substitution change in the backfield. Oh, I see now that LaShawn McCoy's come in now for Damian Williams, and I'm tipped off on that so that when the ball's handed off, I've got the right carrier. Hope that helps.
Behind the scenes stuff is great.
Yeah.
Brendan Gulick, you are up. Let me get your mic.
Yeah, let me precede this by saying I know if I have my bearing straight, I'm looking for you now on here, Brendan. Yeah, you're working with George Veras, I hear.
I am.
Good man. He's going to help you a lot. He's one of the smartest guys I've ever known in my life.
Well, I've certainly enjoyed getting to know him too. No doubt about that. Thanks for joining us this morning, John. Thanks for putting this together. Jim, I wanted to ask you about your process for reading. You know, you mentioned how much time you like to spend reading. When you're going into a market where you know you're going to see two specific teams, how much reading are you doing nationally versus reading local papers versus reading feature pieces?
Yeah, the reading, Brendan, is I've got the national stuff's coming from our research team at CBS. So I see all of that. So I have a pretty good handle on what's going on around the league. You'd be surprised, though, when you're calling a game, 99% of your commentary is really going to be isolated on those two teams. I personally, just a studio background, I like to veer off sometimes coming out of an update from JB in New York, and I like to be able to put in context what that game highlight and what that team's doing. I like to have that full knowledge of the league, but the great majority of it when you're on the air has to do with the teams that you're covering. Now, what I do, though, as far as reading, this doesn't sound revolutionary. To me it is because I'm not a big tech guy. I take every article I can and I Dropbox them. I Dropbox them so I can scan. And all I do, I mean, it feels like my wife was one time making fun of me because she says, all you do all day long is just sit there with the iPad in front of you just going through. And I can read pretty quickly, but it's like reading a book every day. You know, you're reading 300 to 500 pages worth of clips with the CBS 300-page support. It may be anything else you veer off to do. And the teams then, of course, send the press releases and all that. Tony's not a big press release guy, and that's fine. He doesn't need to know all those little details that we play-by-play people do. He's an analyst, and, you know, my book, he's the best there's ever been. I love the guy. But I'm going to always have that covered, even though it's material that's put out by the PR staffs and those teams. I read everything. I'm a compulsive reader. Thank you, Brendan. Good luck to you, man.
Next up, Jack Benjamin. Please state your affiliation and your question.
Yeah, thanks, John, for putting this on. I'm Jack Benjamin, radio play-by-play voice of Nicholls State University down in Louisiana. Jim, appreciate you doing this. Big fan of yours for a while. Actually, was like many of us, was rewatching the Masters from the other day with Tiger's win, and it was great seeing you talk to him. I'm curious, kind of along those lines, when you're doing a big event, which pretty much all of the ones that you do are, when you've got big moments late in a game, whether it's a winning putt at the Masters, a buzzer beater in the NCAA tournament, NFL playoff game, how are you balancing calling the big moment between laying out with the crowd, and kind of how have you developed over time in that respect?
You know, Tiger talks about, thank you, Jack, by the way, and I appreciate what you said about the Masters show. I did that with sitting right here in this chair in this office in my home in California with Tiger last week, and he was really great. He opened up. Tiger often talks about his golf game. He talks about the feels. Anybody that follows golf, he talks about, hey, I have the feels, whatever that means. Well, I kind of know what he means in our sense as broadcasters. You have to always kind of feel like what this moment should allow. And by the way, we're not always right. I mean, I've only been doing it for 35 years at CBS. And if I popped in any tape, I would cringe a good 20 to 30 times per broadcast saying, man, I wish I could have that sentence over. I wish I didn't jam that story in there. I wish I would have set Tony up better than that. So it's never going to be perfect. There's no such thing as the perfect show. You can always strive for it, but you feel it. Now, take Tiger's win in 2019. That might have been the best story I've ever covered, and I've been fortunate enough to cover a lot of big events, 34 Final Fours and 34 Masters, 7 Super Bowls. But that scene when he putted out a year ago, and I called it the return to glory, I didn't say anything for over 2 minutes after that. And I just knew instinctively, and I think virtually all of you would have felt the exact same way. If you tried to insert yourself in that moment, you'd be making a terrible mistake. I really felt like that moment, this a visual medium anyway, it needed to speak for itself. And they've been having all these rebroadcasts and re-airs on the air here lately. And it's been interesting because a lot of times I don't go back and look at every show. So like I had never seen Tigers win last year. I saw the Kansas City New England AFC Championship game from a year ago. CBS replayed it over the weekend. I had never seen that. And it's good to have that distance and space in between when you call it and when you look at it again, because it's too fresh if you do it the next day or that night. And I know, listen, we've all done that. You've called games, you've done a studio show, you've done a report, and you go back, and it's so fresh in your mind. You hear every little misinflection. You maybe kind of stumble over a word, and you're so hypersensitive to it, which, by the way, I want to make this point, that at the time, it's disappointing. You think, gosh, I could have done that better. I see Dan Pfeiffer shaking his head. He knows what I'm talking about here. And so when you get away from it for a while, you don't hear those little stumbles and bobbles. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with them. I had a great piece of advice early in my career from a radio legend who worked for CBS Radio Network. His name was Win Elliott. And one of the first things he taught me, I don't get a chance to say this very often, don't be afraid to make a mistake. Now, what kind of mistake are we talking about? Now, he was talking about the delivery of telling a story, which is what we all are in this business to do, is tell stories. He would purposely, in his sportscast, he would kind of stumble around. He would kind of stutter step and be trying to search for the right word like that. And if you did it without purposely doing it, you'd say, oh, I was grasping for the right word. I couldn't come up with. That was awkward. People probably thought, man, the guy's mind doesn't work fast enough. To the contrary, Win Elliott's point was, you sound more real. You sound more conversational. And by the way, we want to sound conversational when we're doing this. Whatever it is, sideline reporting, play-by-play, radio, TV, you want to sound like the guy that's sitting in your homes right now. You want to come across as conversational as you can. So don't get hung up on that occasional time, which we all do in common speak, in just conversation. If I was to talk to any one of you, our sentence structure would not be perfect. Our delivery of sentences one after another would not be clean all the time. That's how we are. That's how we operate as human beings. No one just spills everything out with perfect poetry and prose. It's natural. And you want to be, once you can kind of break that invisible barrier to where you don't sound like a broadcaster, but you sound like yourself, you've made a giant stride. Your career is going to soar. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. Don't look at your work and cringe every time you hear you've lost for a moment or two for a word, or you stutter through a sentence, or nobody cares. The guy that's listening to it isn't hung up on that like you are. Being perfect is not perfect. Okay, John.
That's great. Next, Tara Lynch. Tara, first of all, thank you for applying for the Jim Nantz Award. I enjoyed your reel. Go ahead with your question.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, John. Jim, it's great to be speaking with you today. I'm an Ithaca College student working at both Ithaca College Television and also at Cornell University with ESPN+. So my question is kind of centered around those two roles. I'm covering a wide variety of sports in a variety of different roles: reporting, anchoring, play-by-play, color. So during the week, I could be doing a whole combination of those things. Do you think it's best to be versatile and continue to explore these options, or do you think it's best to hone in on one or two of those and polishing that skill?
I think right now, at this point in your life, Tara, that the vast experiences are going to suit you really well. That's the way you want to go. I know that everybody kind of has a favorite sport or something that got them hooked on the idea of getting into this business. You were a crazed football fan or basketball fan, whatever it might be. But the more experiences, the better. Again, I've been at this a long time. I'm not I'm just trying to give you scope here. And I've done in my 35 years, because we used to have a lot of ancillary programming that was beyond the mainstream sports. So I think I've done somewhere over 30 different sports in my career. Now, I'm not an expert on the great majority of them. I did polo. I knew nothing about polo. I did a couple of world championships in polo. I did the world speed skating championships. I've done boxing. It's run the gamut, but it served me well to learn and go through the process of learning about those sports. And now, to my good fortune, I'm really down to 3 sports: college basketball, the NFL, and golf, which happen to be my 3 favorites. And again, it's all being at the right place at the right time. Fortunately for me, CBS has a heavy emphasis and an investment in those 3 sports that happen to be my 3 favorite. And but you never know where it's going to take you. And Tara, listen, all those great experiences for you, all those different exposures to sports is going to serve you really, really well. I recommend that highly to everybody. Try to get even things that are awkward. I did 9 years of the U.S. Open tennis, and I never felt like I could talk the language. And I worked with John and Patrick McEnroe, great guys. I worked with Mary Carrillo, who's awesome, Martina Navratilova, Tony Trabert, and I just really watched them and leaned heavily on them and learned how to even become more of a minimalist, so that I would not show my hand. The less I said, the less trouble I could get into. And what I found out in the end was it was actually a better way to go about just about everything you do, is to lean heavily on your analyst and make them shine, allow them to shine. Good luck.
Thank you so much, Jim. Big Buffalo Bills fan, so hopefully you get to call us a little bit more this year.
Hey, listen, Stephon Diggs trade was a good one. And your quarterback, Josh Allen, grew up about 110 miles east from where I am right now. He's a great young man. And I think he gets overshadowed by all the good young quarterbacks in the league. But I think it's going to be a nice little run. And suddenly that division, for the first time in over a decade, is up for grabs. So can't wait to see how that plays out.
Thank you, Tara. Let's go next to Chris Markowitz. Marco, please state your location, your affiliation, and state your question.
Hey, John, thanks for this. And Jim, thanks for taking the time. I'm in North Jersey, but I do a lot of stuff in the Philly area because I went to Drexel. So I do a lot of Drexel games,
cool, as
well as some local high school and college stuff for football. Jim, big fan. We actually share a birthday. So you're one of my favorite comics.
May 17, babe.
Yeah, and I saw the Brady episode of Peyton's Place was on last night right before the Jordan documentary. So I love your backyard. But
thank you.
The question is, I know you talk about a lot of reading in preparation throughout the week for games, and I'm sure you read a lot of articles. You spend time invested in that. But are there any books that you've read that you feel have personally helped your career or influenced you in a productive way? I'm a big guy into reading. Is there anything you recommend book-wise that you feel has helped you?
Yes. And the truth is, when I'm in football season or basketball season, I don't have time to read a book. It's because you're trying to go through 300 to 500 pages a day of material. And I think I'm a speed reader, but I can't double up on that and a book. But when I was getting started in the business, there were books by the broadcasters of my youth that, I just absorbed everything. Howard Cosell had 3 or 4 books that they're all sitting on my shelf up here. I wish I could turn this thing around and show you. Jim McKay, who was a hero, wrote a book called My Wide World. Jack Whitaker wrote a book. I again, I know I'm going to sound a little myopic here, but I trained all my attention. I was so obsessed, compulsive, obsessive compulsive disorder. Basically, I'm not trying to make light of it. I actually think I probably had that. About trying to get into this business, and everything I did, very, very much every waking hour, was trying to figure out a way I could kind of get myself to another level of knowledge. So most of the books you're asking about, to be tangible help to you right now, Chris, I would try to go find those broadcasting books that are out there. Al Michaels had a great book last year about Al's life story. There are a ton of them out there. I wrote a book. I'm not trying to sell you a book. I'm sure you could go to Amazon and buy it for 99 cents now, used. But I wrote a book about my father called Always by My Side. And I used a stretch of time in a 9-week stretch in 2007, a backdrop of calling the Super Bowl, the Final Four, and the Masters, while my father was in late stages of Alzheimer's. And I wanted to write how my father was figuratively with me every step of the way. So it's a lot about broadcasting in there, but it's a story about a family coming together and trying to figure out how to best look after the leader of the family, my father. And that was one of the greatest things I ever did in my life, was to sit down and put into words my love for my dad. I think my dad, you can see him right here. He died in 2000. He died in 2008, and right after the book came out. The book came out Mother's Day 2008, and that's what I would recommend anyway for all of you. Go get Al's book. Go get any of these books about broadcasters, and you're going to hear completely different stories. Joe Buck has a book out. You're going to see different stories in all of these cases, and I think you'll learn. I think you'll learn.
It was after I read Always by My Side that I decided that I wanted to name the award that we were going to start presenting to the nation's outstanding collegiate sportscaster, the Jim Nantz Award. I don't know that I ever told you that, Jim. But
I never knew that.
there you go. Yeah.
Very honored.
Okay, so Jim encapsulates what I want the award to represent professionally. And after reading the book, I knew that it also encapsulated what I wanted personally. So yeah.
Thank you. By the way, Ernie Johnson, I saw someone who wrote, Ernie has a book out. He's an awesome guy. I love Ernie. I think there's a good 10 books out there that you could find, and even go find some of the golden oldies that I mentioned and hear the stories. And I'll tell you, you'll be romanced, as I was as a young kid, and hearing the lives that they had, the people they met. And I was just completely blown away by what that world must look like. And it wasn't about being able to travel and see the world, but it was really, to me, it was about the way that they told the story about the people that they met on their many trips around the world, like in Mr. McKay's case. I wanted that worldly knowledge of how different people live their lives, different cultures around the world, and what that was like to be in Spain or anywhere in Europe or Asia, or wherever he may have gone with Wide World of Sports. And that was a big hook for me. It was the way that he told the story of those people's lives, the subjects that he covered. That was the hook for me. I never had any desire to be on television. I could still, if they never put me on camera, I would be thrilled. That's the least enjoyable part to me of the whole process of putting a show on the air. It's about telling the story. And the guys that really inspired me as a young kid, now it's men and women. Thankfully, our industry has completely enlarged and opened up and inclusive, and it's so much better than it was as a young kid. Of course, we didn't have that much programming compared to now, but it's just neat to see there's so much more opportunity. And I think everybody can relate to that about the hook of telling a story. It's not about the ego feed of being famous or being on television. It's about the art of telling a story. That, when you cut it to your core, is what you have to fall in love with. You have to learn how to fall in love with telling a story. That's what we are. We're storytellers who happen to be covering the greatest things that we all are passionate about, the sports universe. Sorry, John.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
No need to apologize. Rob Hipp, thank you for being here. Please state your affiliation and your question.
Hey, John, and hey, Jim. I appreciate you being here and your time today. You know, Jim, one of my mentors, I love hearing the whole chatter about telling a story. One of my mentors, Bill Schoening, has taught me that, and it's so important. And Bill also told me the part of telling the story is also having a great color analyst. For me, I'm a huge Tony Romo fan. I've been his #1 fan probably forever, and I love the chatter between you and him. So my question, Jim, and I broadcast for Sam Houston State down in Southeast Texas, a little D1 college. My question is that relationship. Bill told me that it's so important to have a really good relationship with your color analyst. Can you talk about just a little bit about that relationship and the preparation that you and Tony have that really makes it such an exciting and a wonderful broadcast?
It's the most, thank you, Rob. And good for Sam Houston State. I know exactly where you are. And you guys have had some pretty good basketball programs, Stephen F. Austin, Sam Houston, all that. But I was fortunate. When you get thrown into a new on-air marriage, you often don't know the guy that you work with. And you need to try to convince your audience is going to enjoy it a lot more if there seems to be that word chemistry, which is what Bill's talking to you about. And, early in my career, I was always a generation younger than the analyst I worked with. I was kind of the young kid being very reverential to the expert. And now it's flipped. I'm the old guy. Tony's a generation younger. By the way, Tony's 40th birthday, as you say, that is tomorrow. So he becomes more of an older guy tomorrow. Got a special video waiting for him tomorrow to be played at home. This party went, of course, out the window that was going to celebrate this occasion. But long before CBS hired him in 2017, I had a friendship with Tony. Coming into Dallas to call the Cowboy games 2 times a year with Thanksgiving every other year, it just kind of naturally evolved. And his love of golf, I've never met anyone who loves golf more than Tony. He was just always curious, always asking me in our production meetings about this guy, that guy, about our golf coverage, our golf team and all that. So one of those years, going back to probably 2009 or 2010, I said, why don't you come out when we're in town to call the Byron Nelson tournament or the Colonial over in Fort Worth? You can be my guest. You can sit up in the tower and put you off to the side. You won't go on the air. You just have a bird's eye view. He said, I'll take you up on that. And he did. So when I would go through Dallas, I would either call Tony or he would in advance say, hey, I'd love to see you when you're in town for the Nelson, and a friendship evolved. And so by the time we got to 2017, I'd been invited to his wedding in 2011. I mean, there was a friendship there. Was a really great friend of mine, and now he's one of the dearest friends in my life. But when we got started and sitting side by side calling games, we didn't have to go through that awkward get-to-know-me process. We already knew each other. We had chemistry. We had fun when we were together. Our wives and kids have a lot of fun together. And, of course, he's got so much energy and excitement and insight that's expressed in a way no one's ever seen before. I'm just very fortunate that it's worked out the way it has. And, as you all know, I just re-signed for another 10 years. So, it's been a goal for us just to try to do this together for a good 15 years. And weekends are so much fun. You guys can maybe think of it this way, because we talked about this process of preparing. We meet with the home teams on Friday. So we're going into Kansas City. For me, living in California, a lot of times it means I have to leave on Thursday. But on Friday, we're at Arrowhead and their practice complex. And we meet with 5 or 6 players, the coaches, and the head coach and the coordinators. And then Friday night, we go out to dinner. Nothing crazy, but just Tony's never in a rush. He loves to sit and just enjoy a great dinner, and so do I. And that is going to involve a lot of things we're going to talk about that aren't about the football game. We know each other well enough to have a lot of interest, and it's much broader than that. And then on Saturday, the visiting team comes in. We go to their hotel, and CBS rents out a conference room, and now they'll bring in the players one at a time. Always the quarterback, 3 or 4 other players, again, the coordinators and the head coach. We come back to our hotel, and we have a production meeting with everyone down to the entry-level production people, the BAs. And we game plan how we're getting on the air. We'll see all the graphics, all the tape roll-ins, and we kind of have a pretty good idea of what the storylines are. We're all centered on the same page. And then the next thing you know, that's usually a night we eat in around that table, around that conference table. And then Sundays you go and do the game. I mean, it has been just an absolute blast. It does not feel like work at all. Sunday night, I get on a plane, head home, and start working on my boards for the next week. Monday morning, I'm up reading about the game for the next week.
Jim, that wraps up our first session. It flew by. Thank you.
I gotta go. I'm done. I don't want to go.
You can take one more question if you'd like.
Hey, honestly, if you want to do this for an hour, I know you got more guests. I'm all in. But
let's take one more question then. And since we're now in the break time, the 10-minute break time, frankly, that was for me more than it is for all you attendees. I don't want to take the break yet. Maybe this afternoon. I do apologize to everybody. I said at the top, you can submit questions via the chat. I didn't know how many we were going to get through the hand raise, and since it's a visual medium, I'm kind of leaning towards taking the hand raises for that reason. So anyway, final question for Jim comes from John Leahy. John,
Spencer up there. Okay.
Affiliation.
Okay. Go for it. I'm looking for you.
For organizing this. Very grateful. Jim, Nice to meet you and see you in person. I do play-by-play for Merrimack College men's hockey and Hockey East. I've been there for 15 years. I also do work for the Lowell Spinners, which is the short season affiliate of the Boston Red Sox. I just had a quick question. I use a lot of stats to support what's going on in the broadcast, and one of the goals I've always had is try to become a better storyteller. Stories, I guess, are a lot more important than stats in the broadcast. Just wondering your quick tips on how to become a better storyteller.
Did you say, John, you're doing radio?
Radio for both, yes.
Well, you see, in radio, it's going to be more important for you to dispense stats. In TV, there's so much now that's already being put up onto the screen. Down a distance, the graphics guys are so quick now. It's just, to me, I think numbers on television lead to a stale broadcast. But I get it in radio because you don't have that visual support. So the storytelling to me, and again, as I try to train myself, going back to like I was 11 years old, I would just really lean into a great speaker, whether it was someone at school or maybe it could be a pastor or a rabbi or someone that is delivering a homily. Just when you see people in their classical form tell a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, in our universe, it can't be a sermon. A lot of times those stories with a beginning, middle, and end might be 10 to 15 seconds. How is that possible? You're always trying to find ways to cut corners because the game's moving, right? I mean, right, John? I mean, it's particularly your sport. It's flying. But I think storytelling is truly the biggest part of our industry. It's at the heart of it all. And I don't have all the answers. I'm still trying to, learn ways to get around it and little tricks to be able to pull up stories and things like that. But if you're going to be on the television side of play-by-play, don't get hung up on numbers. I get so much mail from parents that say, I have a 10-year-old son. He wants to do what you're doing one day, and he can tell you all the batting averages for every team in the league, and he's got all the numbers down. What kind of advice would you give him? And I always say the same thing. Tell him not to worry about the numbers. Mm-hmm. Christopher brought up about a book earlier. Read. And now my life, unfortunately, is really boils down to reading, work preparation type reading. But, I delivered a commencement one time at my school. I was honored to be asked. And I talked about falling in love with the language, learn how to really appreciate, a well-spoken sentence, a well-spoken story. And you get that through reading from all outlets. Be a compulsive reader. I saw, by the way, John, I saw Spencer up here had his hand up. So lightning round question, Spencer, you're up.
I don't know if I can do a lightning round question, but I appreciate it. Unfortunately, this is not the way I wanted to meet you in person, face-to-face, because you and I have been writing letters to each other, and I appreciate all the warm words. My family appreciates it all, too. I think I speak for everybody else here in that you're – that's awesome to see your daughter on camera. That's fantastic.
My little guy here. Say hi, Davis.
But
Hi.
They're all excited.
But it's really fantastic. I think I speak on behalf of everybody with knowing that you're, people talk about Brady being the GOAT of quarterbacks. There's the GOAT of broadcasters is Jim Nantz by far. So my question is a little bit out there from the broadcasting side. So I've noticed that Joe Buck has gone on the Late Show with Stephen Colbert, and we haven't seen any of Jim Nantz on late night television. We haven't seen him done any interviews with Colbert or Fallon or any of those. So my question is, do you have any intentions that you just re-signed for 10 years? Do you have any intentions of going on a late night show by the time your contract's up?
Well, first of all, you got to be asked. Okay. So David Letterman was at CBS. I was on his show a number of times, and I lived in the New York area. Now I live out in California, and I'm not in Los Angeles. I'm 300 miles from Los Angeles. I feels like I'm working pretty much around the clock. I don't want to say that's not. I mean, I don't really, honestly, have given any thought. I was on Colbert one time, but that's not the goal for me. Again, my goal is to tell the story in sports, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being on those shows. I mean, I have been asked, and I've been on. I've had dinner with Jimmy Fallon. Tony's really good friends with Jimmy, and when we've been in LA, we've done that. But I mean, I love my life just the way it is. I don't long for anything. I said this recently to someone. They said, what broadcasting job would you really long to do? What event? And I said, truly, that's just the way I look at the world spiritually. I don't long for anything, and I'm grateful for everything. So what I've been able to do with my career, I don't feel like anything's missing. I don't feel like there's been opportunities I should have gotten. I mean, I'm just grateful for what I have been given. And I just want to say, because I know we're about to exit stage right here, because you got more great guests coming on. But John, what you do for our industry, I didn't have anything close to this. John Leahy can talk about this. We didn't have this long ago. I would have loved to have had this opportunity to have more people, kind of showing you the roadmap to how it goes. I'm talking about John, not talking about me. And it's fascinating to see the interest and the number of people that want to get in this business. And there is opportunity out there. I want to assure you, for everyone. Take that passion you have and don't let go of it. And trust me, you're going to have plenty of naysayers along the way who are going to tell you that's a long shot. It can't happen, or you got to do this, you got to do that. We're all unique people. And there is opportunity out there, and you rub opportunity together with talent and passion, and great things can happen. John, you've created something that all of us should be grateful for. Thank you for attaching my name to the award. And I told you, we'll get into details later on. I want even to get more involved with that, because this is, thanks to you, has become a raging success. I'm going to go. As much as I would really, truly, I'd love to go another half an hour or more. But I wish all of you the best. And don't let anyone ever tell you you can't make it. Again, take that ability you have, and you have it, and take that passion you have and figure out ways when that opportunity comes, that confluence, that merging of all those things, and go for it. And I hope I'll have a chance to meet every one of you down the road. Thank you for 469 of you being right now on this site. This has been awesome, and I hope we can do it again sometime. Spencer, thank you for your question. John, I will see you soon. God bless you all, and stay safe, man. I can't wait to see us.
Thank you a ton, Jim. Imagine.
Hey, I see Chick Hernandez in there. There's a whole bunch of
mine. Good dude, man.
I'm only seeing 24-20 on the screen right now. So I'm missing a lot of friends that I know are out there. But best wishes to everybody, and please stay well. Thank you, John, for what you're doing. Have a great day, everybody.
Imagine a lot, Jim. Applause from 468 people, Corey, right now. We appreciate you.